Goblins are almost synonymous with Dungeons & Dragons. Ironically, the monster I first think of when I think of the game is a goblin rather than a dragon. They're just such a dungeon staple that I can't help but think of them. Goblins come in all sorts of varieties, from wild goblins that barely speak common to civilized goblins that run entire cities or towns on their own. They are truly one of the most versatile creatures under the sun. Welcome to the second episode of Monsters Misguided. Today, we're going to be going over the different types of goblins you can find in the world. When most people think of goblinoids, they think of goblins, hobgoblins, and bugbears. It's understood by many that these are the three pillars of goblinoids, each stronger than the last, but that isn't the case some of the time. Goblins themselves are freakishly adaptable in nature, altering behavior instantly to survive in any conditions. In many cases, they inexplicably manifest extreme physical changes as well, almost overnight. A goblin thrust into an environment much rockier than its natural habitat oftentimes develops a skin pigmentation to match its surroundings, with rocky-looking protrusions from its shoulders, temples, and upper back. Likewise, a goblin that finds themselves in a watery habitat will just as well undergo the same type of skin changes, as well as physical changes, such as a nose capable of shedding and small gills to enable underwater breathing. For further explanation, I'm going to cover some specifics for a range of goblin offshoots. Now, just to retread some specific examples, we'll start with the mountain goblin. Off the bat, you'll notice its rockier exterior, with clumps of hardened skin that took on the appearance of stone. This gives them an extra +2 to their AC, cranking it up to 14, assuming they weren't using armor or shield in the first place. As well as the extra protection, they are now much more resistant to the elements. They take 1 point of damage reduction from fire and cold damage, 5 to 4, 3 to 2, and so on. Some even have the ability to burrow, giving them a dig speed of 10 feet. Their stat array is also pumped by 1 in strength and 2 in constitution, making them a rather formidable version of a goblin. Aquatic goblins are primarily built for water-based mobility. They get water breathing, a swim speed of 30 feet, and advantage on athletics checks to swim. These abilities manifest as nose slits that can shut air tight, gills on their neck, and webbed fingers and toes. Some even have fins from their elbows, shoulder blades, and calves. Alongside that, they get a +1 to constitution, having survived deeper waters, and a +2 to dexterity, because they're slippery sons of bitches. Cave goblins are some of the creepiest to look at. Their completely white skin and massive black eyes are enough to put anyone off. Of course, like many goblinoid adaptations, they all serve a purpose. Cave goblins have dark vision, like every goblin, but they get an extra 20 feet of it, pushing it to 80 feet max. They also develop sunlight sensitivity and blind sight out to 20 feet, both due to extremely sensitive skin. Furthermore, thanks to their insane grip, they're also able to walk up vertical surfaces without expending any extra movement, and they can cling upside down, walking around like that and treating the movement as difficult terrain. For their stat increase, they benefit from a +1 to strength and a +2 to dexterity from years of lifting themselves around their caves. Frost goblins are rather interesting as well. With blue skin and white hair, they're sometimes confused for ethereal beings, at least for a couple seconds, until their crude behavior gives away the fact that they're a goblin. Due to their time developing in chillier environments, frost goblins have much more body hair than most notably on their forearms. They also have been known to grow beards, comparable to dwarves at times. Due to that, they have resistance to cold damage, having grown used to the frigid environments. This also provides them with a +1 to wisdom and a +2 to constitution. Goblins often break away from their natural habitats, finding themselves in cities of men, elves, or otherwise. This leads them to develop mannerisms similar to the residents of the cities. Now, city-dwelling goblins are the most diverse subset of goblins, taking on the characteristics of the specific castes they spend time around as well as the races. A goblin dwelling near aristocratic elves may develop a strong sense of elitism and hold their heads high while talking, whereas a goblin dwelling with dwarven miners may develop a drinking problem and a more planted, sturdy gait. Scholars used to talk about whether or not each subsection of city-dwelling goblin should classify as its own subsection under goblin, but before they could vote on it, the scholar in charge of writing the book ran out of pages, so they kept all the types of city goblins as one. Nobody has thought to make a secondary supplementary book on the subject because they're all just so enamored at the idea of goblins wearing little suits and shoes, which is understandable, but I digress. Regardless of these arguments, spending time in higher civilization affected these goblins in ways that they all share. City-dwelling goblins all gain a +2 to both intelligence and charisma. They also gain a new language of choice. Most take common. Finally, city-dwelling goblins are also treated as medium creatures, having grown taller to fit in better with their compatriots. That just about tops off all I have to say on the subject. Of course, these aren't all the subtypes of goblins there are, not even by a long shot. I skipped Roid Rager goblins, ghost goblins, skeletal goblins, shark goblins, goblin ghillie archers, pyromaniac goblins, and way more. But that's neither here nor there. As long as you're creative, you can bring any number of variations to the table to keep your random goblin encounters that much more interesting. Of course, nothing here is to be taken as law. If you liked some bits of the variations but disliked others, just feel free to change them around to fit your game world. You probably noticed that there wasn't a story this time. That's mainly because I wanted to dig in further with the specifics, and also because I didn't have a relevant story. You can help change that. I've set up a Patreon where you can pledge and submit your stories, as well as vote on the subject of the next Monsters Misguided video I make. So head over there and check it out. That's going to be it for me, but if this video gets over 1,000 likes, I'll get around to making a part 2 of this Goblin guide later on down the line. Anywho, see you next time.